Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze the main tactical theme in the opening half of Arsenal's 3-1 win over Chelsea. So in today's video, first we're going to focus on Chelsea's defensive shape, then we'll focus on the movement of the Arsenal shuttlers, and lastly we'll break down the 3 Arsenal goals that involved Xhaka's positioning. So when we break it all down and we do look at the board, we have both sides playing in a 4-3-3, and that suggested that there could be a system clash as there would be man v man across the pitch. You'd have the fullbacks against the wide players, you'd have 2v1 with the center backs against the center forwards, and in that midfield zone it'd be Conte against Xhaka, Odegaard against Kovacic, and then it would be down to how both sides wanted to deal with Enzo or Jorginho. So when we break this down, first we're going to focus on Chelsea's defensive shape, as Arsenal did dominate possession, and there was clear interest as to how Chelsea would cope with Arsenal's 3-2-5. Traditionally, when sides do play in a 4-3-3, they drop off into a 4-5-1 out of possession, and from here Chelsea could simply have a Aubameyang sitting on Jorginho, and then Conte and Kovacic dealing with Odegaard and Xhaka, while Enzo protects open space in that midfield zone ahead of the center backs in case Gabriel Jesus looks to drop deeper, or if Trossard looks to pull Azpilicueta in towards that midfield zone, then Enzo could shift over and pick him up. However, when you see Arsenal shifting into that 3-2-5, it has Zinchenko moving into that central area, and then you end up seeing White and Gabriel operating as the wide center backs. In most situations, if White does get the ball, Sterling would pick him up, and here in that midfield zone it would present a 2v1 as Aubameyang would be tasked with Zinchenko and Jorginho. The other key element to Arsenal's 3-2-5 is that we've often seen the center backs having time and space on the ball to attempt to play through the midfield zone, and here Lampard wanted to ensure that Gabriel couldn't play out of the back with his left foot, so you ended up seeing Chelsea often shift into a 4-4-2 with Conte in a more advanced position, and Conte would step forward to attempt to press Gabriel. From there, you're expecting him to block off the passing lane in towards Zinchenko, and if he didn't do that, then that would force Enzo to step forward to apply pressure to Zinchenko to ensure that he couldn't get on the ball freely. From there, that leaves Xhaka free, and that's where you'd see the wide player tucking in to close him down, and there you could see Chelsea doing a very good job of closing down that Arsenal midfield, and then it would leave the wide players in 1v1s with the fullbacks, and then the center backs would have 2v1 against Gabriel Jesus. Now essentially, if you do see Chelsea dropping off into that 4-4-2, it would be Jorginho dropping ahead of the center backs or just in line with them to get on the ball, and at times you'd see Zinchenko doing that as well to attempt to pull out Conte or Aubameyang and then get one of the center backs on the ball, and if the Chelsea front two at the time out of possession wouldn't step forward, then they would have the freedom to attempt to play passes in towards the middle third or the final third. And then essentially there were brief periods where you ended up seeing Arsenal look like more of a 2-3-5 with Zinchenko and White in narrow half space positions on the outside of Jorginho. Arsenal's 3-2-5 success in that opening half stemmed through the positioning of Xhaka and Odegaard as they looked to push beyond their midfield markers into space between the lines and were looking to make forward runs beyond the center backs and behind. What ended up happening was that if Zinchenko or Gabriel could get on the ball, you could see Xhaka looking to push beyond Enzo into that pocket of space. There were situations where he dropped off into a wider position and you saw Trossard move central and Zinchenko in that midfield zone, or you would often see Xhaka in that gap of space between Fofana and Azpilicueta. Whereas throughout the game in that opening half, it was Odegaard looking to receive the ball in space between Kovacic and Sterling, and Arsenal did a very good job of finding Odegaard in that space, and from there he could progress the play out towards Saka, or he would look to push forward into that gap of space between Chilwell and Thiago Silva, and that would create space for the ball to be pushed out towards Saka. It was often Odegaard who was receiving the ball in that pocket of space between the lines, and a simple avenue for Chelsea to disrupt Odegaard from receiving possession was having Kovacic track his movement and block off the passing lane in towards him, but that didn't happen on a consistent basis, and there were also situations where Odegaard was shifting towards the outside of Sterling to get the ball to push forward. As stated prior, there were situations where Odegaard and Xhaka both were looking to make runs off the midfield bank into that space between the fullback and the center back, but there were situations where you had Gabriel looking to pick out Odegaard, and Thiago Silva did a very good job of tracking that movement and clearing lines. So in many ways, if Arsenal weren't playing between that pocket of space of Kovacic and Sterling to get the ball in towards Odegaard, they enjoyed success down the left-hand side where they were looking to play around Chelsea's front six six to get the ball in towards their attacking players. You got Gabriel Jesus dropping off the center backs, and he wasn't being tracked in towards that area, so he could serve as an outlet to receive the ball between the lines. Trossard was dropping and dragging out Azpilicueta, and then looking to pick out the runs of Xhaka, Odegaard, or Gabriel Jesus, breaking beyond the Chelsea backline. If Conte didn't get tight on Gabriel, or Gabriel was free to push the ball forward, then he could look to play the ball in towards Zinchenko, who could then find Odegaard between the lines, and from there Odegaard could progress Arsenal's attack. And the other alternative for Arsenal would be to have either Xhaka or Zinchenko, or at times both of those two players, shifting in towards space near the left touchline, and from there they could get on the ball, and Zinchenko would be able to receive it freely and slide it across to Xhaka, or Zinchenko would simply get the ball in that area and look to find the movement of either Xhaka or Gabriel Jesus dropping into space between the lines. And from there, Arsenal were able to maneuver around the Chelsea backline to get Xhaka on the ball in space, where he could look to find the run of Odegaard. If you analyze the build-up to both of Odegaard's opening goals, it starts with Xhaka or Zinchenko shifting out towards the touchline zone, one of Gabriel Jesus dropping off into that space between the lines, and Xhaka continuing a forward run that's not being tracked in towards the final third, where then he's able to receive the ball and create. In the build-up to Arsenal's opening goal, it's Xhaka on the ball, receiving at the halfway line. He locates Zinchenko, and he slides the ball across the wide player for Zinchenko, and from there you have Trossard and Odegaard free between the lines. Xhaka continues his forward run beyond Conte, and from there Zinchenko has time and space to pick out Gabriel Jesus free between the lines that no one picks up. Gabriel Jesus receives the ball in that space, and now focus on that left-hand side where the midfield bank is bypassed. No one's picking up Xhaka, and Gabriel Jesus could slide the ball out towards that zone. You have Odegaard continuing his run beyond Kovacic, and from there Xhaka looks to pick out the run of Odegaard, but focus on his movement. He's looking to run backwards, and Kovacic is running towards the box, and that's where you see Xhaka sliding the ball across Kovacic, who already committed, for Odegaard, who gained a half yard of space to fire a first-time effort beyond the keeper. And then minutes later, it's Gabriel sliding the ball across Conte, who doesn't get tight, for Zinchenko receives the ball on the touchline, and focus on the positioning of Xhaka. When Zinchenko receives the ball, he slides it across his marker for Xhaka, who's beyond the midfield bank, and when he receives it, you see Odegaard also in that space. Xhaka's free to carry the ball forward and slide it out to Jesus, who shifts towards the left touchline. Xhaka ends up dragging out Enzo and Azpilicueta towards him, and that allows Jesus to drop the ball off to Trossard, and from there he pulls out a marker, and no one's tracking the movement of Xhaka. From there, Trossard drags two players towards him, picks out Xhaka unmarked, and from here he fires a low ball through the penalty area. Odegaard runs off the blind side of Sterling, who doesn't pick him up, and from there Odegaard could fire a first-time effort beyond the keeper to double Arsenal's lead. And then even when you focus on the build-up to the third goal, it's Jesus dropping off the center backs to receive the ball, Odegaard running off Kovacic and Sterling, and from there he slides the ball wide for White, who ran off Sterling in towards the final third. From there, when you look at the penalty area, White has time to play a ball in towards that zone. You have Trossard and Gabriel Jesus isolating Azpilicueta, but focus on Xhaka at the back post. No one's tracking his movement, and when that ball is played over the top of Azpilicueta, who can't deal with it, it falls into the path of Gabriel Jesus, but look at Xhaka making that run at the back post freely. When Jesus receives the ball, he ends up pulling it back across the defender for Xhaka, but Xhaka can't get the ball out of his feet, and his shot is scuffed, but it falls into the path of Jesus, who fires a first-time effort from point-blank range beyond the keeper. So as you can see, Chelsea's poor defensive structure was comfortably exploited by Granit Xhaka's positional variation, which helped the Swiss international occupy vacant zones of space to serve as a creator in the final third.